I'm glad to be here. This is not a push for the book, so if you're concerned about that, there is a Lego My Bible book. That's really not what we're going to do today. We can talk about it, but I just really wanted to talk to you about how it came about and why it came about, because, Legos were my way, but that doesn't mean Legos are going to be your way. There's a lot of different things that you can do. And so I, in Dallas, am the Children and Family Ministry Director. And so I work on a team of these really wonderful people. And so we do Sunday school, but then we also do a lot of midweek formation and seasonal things. And about 5 years ago, I guess, we tried one more, like we're going to do Wonderful Wednesdays. If we call it wonderful, everybody's going to come, and it's going to be amazing. And the same 12 faithful families came. So 12 sounds like a lot to some communities, but St. Michael has 7,000 people. So when we're only welcoming that size, we're missing the mark somehow. And so even though we were going to do this, we got everything ready, all the carts were, all the supplies are ready to go, and then we realized that there's these 3 first grade boys that are going to come, and somehow we hadn't planned anything for first grade. So we're looking at each other like, oh my goodness. And it was going to be about a couple hours until these people were going to show up. And so what I knew about those guys is that they only spoke the language of Legos or Star Wars. And so I'm a girl mommy, and so I don't know much about Star Wars at all. And really actually didn't know that much about Legos. And somehow Legos felt a little bit easier to fake if you had to fake something. And so what we did was we had a volunteer who was really actually rigid, and I thought, oh no, this is not the person to spring a surprise on. But I said, okay, well, here's the Bible, and here's the bucket of Legos, and what I just want you to do is tell the story, and then they can make the story in Legos. And so I thought that was just going to be like the safeguard for just like getting us through 1 week, and what happened was then they couldn't stop talking about it all week long. And even though it wasn't all that complex, we hadn't developed all the other things that were going to go around it, there was something about creating that story with a familiar thing that just really deeply spoke to their soul. And so I love storytelling. I love to tell stories. I love to hear stories. I grew up in a family, a German family, where story was really important. My mom probably put this into me. She would listen to NPR to go to sleep at night. So it was as if someone was telling her a story to go to bed, even as a grown-up. And I thought, how you can do that now? And so that's why I think that this has spoken so much to my soul, because I think that in all of our busyness, we have forgot to create stories in our homes. And even in our faith communities. I think we have scripture read, but we don't tell that story. And it's very different. Those 2 processes, how you engage in that story, are just so different. And so we started with this Legos, and it grew from 3 boys to about 10 kids within a couple weeks. And then it was, I can't come home Wednesday nights, when are you going to do this in Sunday school? And so honestly, we haven't done it in Sunday school at St. Michael's as a traditional option. We usually use it mostly during midweek, but I do know from all the people that have talked about it that Sunday morning is an option. And so when you see all the stuff, if you do look at the book, there's snack ideas and wondering questions and all these things. What we know is that on a Sunday morning, you probably don't have a full hour. You may have, when all is said and done, a half an hour if you're lucky, right? And so what you can do is just pull back to those important pieces of gathering in a circle and sharing a story, and then having some reflection on that story. And so some people have either said, oh, I really love this, or, oh gosh, this is just godly play with Legos. It's the same thing. And so the answer to both of those things is yes, it actually is meant to be a familiar language. It's not meant to be the same thing, because there's something very different that happens in godly play, but there is that sense of wonder, there is that sense of gathering, and having that story be taken to the center of the place and allow it to just be, and it can mean different things for the different people. And so normally what happens is, so if we're talking about methodology, is there anything that you want to know more about before we start talking about the nuts and bolts? Is there anything?
Does this work for girls and boys?
It does. It does. The initial thing was, being a girl mommy, church kind of comes easy, because there's a lot of things about church that we make girly or sensitive or whatever. I don't want to use bad language, but you know what I mean. There's things that it's easier And so I just have a love for boys, because I'm living in my house and they're kind of like a foreign nation to me. I don't really necessarily understand all their pieces sometimes, and so, but what I know is that, you know, I was, as a Sunday school director, as part of my job, there was just all these behavioral things that kept coming up. And, you know, it was all about what's missing in the boys as opposed to what's missing in the way that we spend time with them. So that was sort of a part of it for me. So girls like it just as much as boys. They enter into it a little bit differently. Girls want to work individually, and boys surprisingly actually want to create a whole village or a whole scene or the entire night, you know, put all their things together. But it's a boy and a girl. And a boy and a girl thing. It is a good question.
I've actually just started, I have the book, but I haven't integrated in Sunday school, but I've put like a classroom gathering time. So that a lot of it for everybody, and they seem to enjoy it.
Well, and you might have things, you might already have things that work that you love, but sometimes there's just a lesson that's a total dud. I don't know if you've ever had that where you're like, oh my gosh, there's about 15 minutes that I do not know what I'm going to do. And you can take that. There's a lot. There's Old Testament and New Testament stories. You can just take the method and do any stories that you have. I mean, it's usually better if there's obvious characters and there's an obvious sort of plot. You know, I don't spend a lot of time in like a Bible with the songs because it just there's nothing to see. Yeah. Part of it's sort of like create the songs and Legos, but yeah. So you can see there. Use it if there's a piece of your lesson that doesn't feel like it's connecting. It can be a part of Vacation Bible School. It can be a part of your vestry meetings. It can be, I think what people just assume is that because it's Legos, it's for kids, and what we know and what we've been hearing from a lot of different people is that it's just not true, that all of us have this creative sense. And somehow we're taught at a certain age that we're not supposed to exercise that as our first way of being. And I disagree. You know, even if you don't pick up the physical Legos at a vestry meeting or a women's retreat or wherever, there's wondering questions. You know, there can be such deep, important things said around just a very basic wondering questions put out there. Because you're not trying to get to a specific destination, you're trying to create a place where you can know each other a little bit better and not have to be one thing. So yeah, is there anything else?
Yeah, I was wondering if there are any hiccups or pushback for any of this, because it sounds so ideal that we might be aware of before we start getting into the tactics.
Hiccups about how people feel about it?
About how people feel, or just logistically, something you didn't even consider and you're like, oh, I've got to remember to do that. Like I'm thinking some of the little pieces, keeping it separate from where the very young children are.
Sure.
Normally we have an integrated classroom.
So just from a developmental perspective, you should not be putting this in the hands. Let's pick a good one, let's see. This will go right down somebody's throat. So what we know is that there are Duplos. So if you're really committed to doing this with a younger group, the Duplos, which are the bigger ones, and they even have the people and the little cows and everything to go with them.
There's also the mega blocks, which are even bigger.
And there's the mega blocks, which are even bigger. So if you wanted to do a whole group building, you're absolutely right. Those are, you can even use, because budgets are different, you know, those old school cardboard, they look like brick. You know, if you wanted to do something on a bigger scale, you can do that. So I wouldn't use this with anyone really before pre-K 5, honestly. Because even 4-year-olds surprise us sometimes. Yeah. And so the piece that I learned that I didn't know the first couple times is the importance, and I know they're expensive, the importance of having the minifigures. So this, Gail laughs at me because I actually talk about it like, even when I was storing the Lego bin yesterday, I said to the man, this is like $200 of Lego figures. You need to hear me that this can't get legs and walk away. And he's like, okay. All right, it's gonna be okay. And so, you know, ironically, when I got there, I couldn't even find it because it was shoved behind everything. So no one was gonna steal my Lego figures. But I literally walk around, like, you know, actually have it in a tackle box normally, so with a little lock, just so in case. But the importance of what I found is that at the beginning we didn't have the building plates, the blue ones that you see over here, and we didn't have a lot of minifigures. And so what happened was they couldn't really figure out how to create a whole story. I just got little chunks of stories, and they sort of built, and then they were finished really quickly. And so I felt like there wasn't enough times where we're pulling out, you know, snack time to be longer. But once we committed to having those building plates and the figures, the whole story came alive. It was really amazing how much it changed what we did. Because to try to create the figures and Legos, I mean, the reality is everyone's budget is different. And you can find things other places, but
Yeah, my question is actually related to that. Do you have any recommendations, or maybe you've heard from folks who started this ministry, where they, let's say they have no Legos in their Sunday school.
Right.
Where do you, let's say you have a little bit of seed money to get some basics, but I mean, do you go on Craigslist, do you go on eBay?
you can do all those things. You Craigslist, eBay, tag sales, freecycle.com is where a lot of people found it because they just, those families that are just aging out of Legos.
What was it?
Freecycle.com, and that's an online trading site where they just throw it up on there and it tells you where it is, and whoever's the first to get to the curve is the one that gets it. The also thing is that there's a lot of Legos hanging around in the closets and the playrooms of your families, possibly. And if not, there are some people, you have to be careful with your budget because, a lot of churches don't allow for special giving to special things. But when it's appropriate, you can say, I'd actually really love for you to sponsor. Could you, even if you're not, someone who is at that age and you don't even have kids anymore, there's something really wonderful about going into a Lego store or going to Walmart or wherever you're going to go and just pick up that thing and bring it in. Lego online has a lot of things.
I'm looking for our church.
Yeah.
I can kind of answer that maybe a little better. You're okay with that?
Sure, go ahead.
We had a drive to pay for our new narthex furniture, and it was going to be for our rector's 10th anniversary. So the people did actually give to the narthex furniture, but that is tax deductible.
Right.
What was not tax deductible was giving to the deacon's retirement fund. Specifically to the retirement. So if you ask people to give to a Lego fund,
Right.
they would be able to deduct that. That could be something that's on their, their state community.
That's right. So you just have to figure out what's appropriate and inappropriate in your faith community. But yeah, absolutely. There's a, and people, if they know there's a need, sometimes what happens is we sit around and we don't tell everybody what it is that we need.
Right.
And so there can be announcements in the bulletin. There can be, at least in Dallas where I am, the really popular thing right now is the Facebook online tag sales. And I have known some places to get everything that they need from, because they buy, you buy them by the pound in these big plastic bags or something. So, it's just getting the word out and asking people to look in their closets and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't have to be that you literally buy, thousands and thousands of dollars, because no one really has it to do it that way. Yeah. Anything else? Just wondering about, how do you know if you have enough? Like how do you know? So usually what happens, for us at least, what we have found out is that these popcorn buckets that you just get at the dollar store, if you have enough to have this kind of half full for each kid, it just seems like that gives them enough room to be able to create whatever they want. So that's the way that we have figured it out.
Do they trade?
What?
Do they trade?
Do they trade?
Let's trade.
Yeah, you can trade. Usually and we'll talk about how it all works when we do it, but yeah, we love to trade.
So this is related to people, and maybe you'll get this how it all works. But one of the things that caught us so short was when we do God and play questions, and where are you in the story? And then, 2 weeks in, one kid said, I'm in God with God. And that was his answer for everybody the rest of the year. And the next year, what we did is they each chose a person at the beginning of the year and put it in a bag with their name on it. And as they came into the room, they took their bag, they moved themselves, and then they put themselves in the story. So it was weird.
Oh, I love that. The idea of having that
There I
same
am.
figure.
I love that.
Which is really important for them to be able to see that story.
And they're in that concrete stage.
Yeah. And this is, as much as we think that they can sort of do this abstract thinking, some of it is very concrete still. You're right. So, anything else that you're sort of wondering before we talk about the nuts and bolts of how it actually sort of works? All right. It is very similar to godly play or catechesis in that sense, where there is someone, you have a greeting at the door, is how it works for us. So there is a greeting at the door, a check-in, a name tag, a how are you. We take the washable, the dry erase markers and write the child's name on the side, because this actually really does become something special and holy to them, and so if they think they lost it, it's actually pretty traumatic. So we have gone to writing their name on it, giving them a building plate, and because there is that staggered start, what we allow, I don't like that language, but what happens is is that there's some time for free build. So they go to the bucket, they dig up their stuff, they go to their special spot in the room, and they can just create whatever they would like until it feels like everyone's there. And so once everyone's there, they sort of put their buckets to the side, we gather in a circle, kind of like old school circle time, and that's when we read the story or tell the story. There is a check-in, what we have done. There's all kinds of ways that you can do prayers. Traditionally, I've done where they write a prayer on a brick and we build a wall of prayers. You know, if we're doing like a 5-week series or something like that, or in a classroom for Sunday school. But what has spoken to the most recent groups is I asked them to bring 3 Legos to the circle with them. And so what happens is we stick one of these buckets in the center, and we pray into each of those 3 Legos something. So usually it's something that I'm sad about, something I'm happy about, and something I want God to help me with. Those are usually sort of the 3 things. You know, or something good, you know, something that was happy today, something that made me sad, and what I need help with. And it's interesting that what I need help with is the one that gets the most conversation afterwards. So after each prayer, they squeeze it, they're thinking about it. Does everybody have their prayer? And when everybody thinks they do, we just put it into the bucket. And you have to remind them, even the ones that don't make it into the bucket, God does hear, because there's a little bit of, oh my gosh, my prayer did not go in. It's not, no, this is not a wish. No, this is not a wishing well. So, and then there's story time. There's check-in on how their week was, because I am shocked at how few people are actually asked, other than, how was your day in the quick car ride? Tell me something from your week that I wouldn't know unless you told me. And they tell these amazing stories of their lives. And they have figured out, if they're an experienced Lego My Bibler, they know that they need to keep it short. But they say really beautiful things. And so once all those prayers are said and all the check-in is done, and the story is told, we do some wondering questions together. And so usually, you know, beyond probably 3 is probably as many as you can do if you've got an hour. And what happens is that there have been some weeks that things have come up in the wondering questions or the prayer time where we have spent a lot of time in that circle, and maybe only had this much for building. And somehow, because they have learned to love each other in community after a couple weeks, that somehow was okay. I thought that there was going to be like a result. Everyone was going to want to stay much later, but it was okay because they have learned at a very early age what it means to listen not just to the Bible story, but to listen to each other's stories in a way that I stand back and marvel at, actually, as a grown-up sometimes. So once the story's told, I have found, Luke asked this question. He said, do you use the Brook Bible? And I don't know if you've seen that one, but it's, you know, the Old and the New Testament done in Lego figures. And the answer is, I have it in my collection. I don't show it very often, only because I think it puts too much of an image of what it has to be in their mind, and I don't like that. I really want that to be, I think it's helpful for like teenagers, because actually some of the language in that Bible is kind of snarky. And that sort of thing, but I think it's interesting that someone did it. What I actually do is I take, and I just go to Google Images, and I do the search on a high resolution, and I just Google whatever the story is for that week. So like last week was Jonah, and so I will pass around, or I'll hold up, different images of what other artists have thought that story looked like. So it gets the story in their mind. I'm a visual learner, so when I just hear the story, it doesn't always do it for me. So I try to create a bunch of different images, so that it's something that's going to speak to your soul in some sort of way. And so then the room that we often use has a fireplace in it, and I just tack them up around the fireplace, and they can go up and look at it if they want to, if they're kind of stuck or wondering. And I leave the Bibles out, so that if they want someone to read the story again or to look at it themselves, they can sort of go back and forth for some resource stuff. But then what we do is we just set them off in the room with their bucket and their building plate. And the only 2 rules that I have, and I hate to use that language, but go ahead. Yeah.
I was thinking of models. Photos.
Right, so photos. And some of them are just suggestions on what, so sometimes you get stuck and just kids don't know where to start with the story. And you can just suggest some elements or pick out some of the things or say, gosh, when I read that story, the word I heard today was send. Or I really was focusing on the water in the story today for some reason. So you can even just talk out piece of that story to get them seeing how you can begin to just wonder and connect those pieces. But so what we do is they go off in their places. The only 2 rules that I have are you have to make something from the story first, and you can't rush. You know, you have to really be thoughtful about something from the story, and it can be that you are just making the water. You know, I have had kids who have just created the ocean and there's nothing in it, and that's okay because that's the part that they heard. And then the other rule is you cannot have any non-Bible time weapons. And that's actually harder than you would think sometimes. And not just with the boys, which is interesting. So you know, if the story has a weapon in it, great, fine, go ahead. But there doesn't need to be semi-automatic weapons on the front of the ark. It just doesn't work that way, right? So it doesn't add to the story. And I've had a lot of conversations about what is a Bible time weapon and what's not. And so, yeah, bazooka's not in the Jonah story. So, and I've asked them why that's important. And they actually sort of back down off of it because it's not. But it's you know, there's so much of that that's just sort of fed into the lives of our kids right now, of this aggressive sort of stuff, and it does not have to be that. This can be one of those places where they can let go of that. So they have this time, and what usually happens is that they sort of end in different times. And so we create what we call the museum. And so there's a deck along the sides, and it happens to be in the room that I use, like a serving bank, you know. And they put their stuff up, we take a picture of it individually, we take a picture of them with it, and then I make a commitment to within the hour sending that picture to somebody that they love. So their parents or their grandparents, or so we have sort of an email or a text list, and so they get that image. A lot of the parents already have that image before they come back. And I just use my phone. It doesn't have to be fancy. And then the thing is that then that person tells me about what they created and why they created that. And so that is probably some of the best work that's done. And I encourage you to not skip over that part, even if it feels like time is tight, to just have that one moment where you say, and sometimes it's like, I don't know, but I just really liked the fish. Okay, well, I like fish too. So it's meant to be that conversational time because you know what, they don't have a lot of one-on-one. Even if you think that you're doing amazing parenting, it's amazing how little time we spend outside of directions and cues of actually having conversation with our people. So they do that, and the deal was, you know what was interesting is they used to then take their stuff and put it back in the bin, and what I realized is that was a really hard thing for them to do, because to break their story, I saw the kids sort of walking out like this, and I'm like, we had fun, what's the matter? Or it was a really important time, and what I realized is they weren't ready to let go of that needed to stay somewhere in its place. And so what I have started, and it also helps keeping my Lego figures where they need to be, we allow for those spaces to have those stories to stay there until they leave. And then I actually allow for them to stay up for about an hour, because I have had kids who have come back later who just needed to show somebody what they created. And so that's what happens. And so sometimes I actually have a few of them in my office because I just haven't been able to take them apart. I just really love them so deeply, and I just love that moment that I want to just keep it. So mine sort of looks like a little bit of a Lego warehouse in the thing. And so I have just a story I want to read to you. Actually, I'll read both of them. They're very short. So in the front of the book, there's all the stuff that you would need to know if you are interested. The reality is what we've said here gives you enough that you can just do it if you wanted to. And so one last thing that I want to tell you is that I usually either text or email or send a paper copy home of where the scripture was, so the name of the story and where they can find it. And so that's the goodbye that we say to each other as we leave, is in the presence of whoever's picking them up. I'll say, this is the story that we read together, and when you're looking for it this week, this is where you can find it. So when you say, so when you're looking for it this week, is the assumption that maybe you should check this out again. This should not be the only moment. And what I know is that if I just said we did Jonah, they wouldn't know what to do. And so, we don't want to shame people into the realization that they don't know where to find the Jonah story. So what we do is we just give it to them, exactly where it's going to be. What I have found is that this goes under the car seat and then becomes like a napkin on Wednesday. So what I do is usually send this image in a text transform. And go ahead, Julie.
What would it be like to photograph the stories, to take a smartphone and photograph each of the kids' stories and keep that and send it home too?
Well, we do.
Does that feel?
We do. So what I do is before the end of I say within the hour, I will send the picture that we took to your special person. So we have a lot of people who come with grandparents or aunts and uncles, and so we try to be really careful with the language. But whoever is your special person, we're going to send it to. So within the hour, and what's so fun is you can tell the parents who have already looked at their texts or their emails, because when they come through the door, it feels like they've already been here, and I love it.
Is there a reason why you couldn't combine the picture with the little tagline that says "We did Jonah"? You can find it here.
It's a good thing, yeah. Part of it is I was shooting them off as quick as possible, and I just want to be as present to everybody. But you're right. You're absolutely right.
You said, I'm imagining, because I've really been wanting to try this for a while, and I'm imagining the child who's made this artwork that they're dying, then they want to take it home with them. So is there a way to establish the ground rules of these Legos live here at church?
Yeah. Well, and that was the first reason for the photos was that there were some kids who could not, they just really needed to have that be something that they could hold on to. And I said, well, these belong to our preschool, and I'm really sorry that you can't keep them, but I know that this is important. So let's take a picture, and we did, selfies with the thing, and pictures with just him, and that felt like enough. But sometimes, and that's why we also don't break them at the end, because they can walk home with that whole story to their mind. Yeah.
Sorry, this is not true. I think it's so awesome that they have to learn that. Like, my daughter is such, she's like a hoarder. She's like the styrofoam insert of her girl doll.
Yes.
She's like, that's a bathtub. I'm like, please, can we go to the little girl Legos, like they created them for little girls to build and play with and not take them apart.
Right.
My nephew's come over and she's like,
Yes, no, the mystery
I
camper is
was really neat because this is an opportunity where it's cool to just go, this is a material thing. It was an expression of art and I'm walking away from it, even though maybe the first and second and maybe the third time I'm devastated.
Yeah.
The fourth time I'm like, this is okay and I've learned something without letting go of this.
Well, and a lot of the language is, this is what it was today, I just wonder what next week it's going to look like. And so if we don't have them, we need to keep them here so that we can make something else. But it's just hard, and and it is part of just the learning process. So yeah.
I think it's really cool. I always love stuff that helps with my very big struggles.
Yes.
I will tell you that I still have my 34-year-old son's Legos that he built, wrapped in tissue, in boxes, in my attic, that he is saving to eventually play with his 2.5-year-old son.
Well, they now make this special Lego glue that you don't have to take them apart. So yeah. So I want to read you just two short things because I think it really captures why. These were some of the stories from the earliest groups, and so. And I still have both of these creations actually in my office. I told Michael them and I said, there's always that story in that child who shows us the face of God. For me, that person was Riley, 5 years old. Riley struggled creating anything related to the story and had a one-track mind that only prayed for dead dinosaurs. After 5 weeks of disconnect, something remarkable happened. We gathered as a group for the prayer and storytelling and reflection on the building questions. And we looked at the suggested images like we often did, but this time, something was wholly different. Riley worked and worked, digging deep down into the bucket, clearly on a mission. When it came time to display and discuss his work, he proudly presented a tiny creation of only 3 Lego pieces. It looked like a tiny clamshell with a single Lego figure nestled inside. After 5 long weeks, Riley slowly spoke the wisdom of the ages. This is Jonah. The fish wasn't angry. The fish was a helper. This is Jonah and the whale. He was waiting for God. Sometimes you need to wait for God in some way. So this kid who, I literally had to do my, go to my happy place here means Riley. We all have a Riley, right? Everybody has that, oh, I love him, and he is the child of God, and drives me. And I still have that little plan thinking about breaking just those 3 pieces apart, because it really was. And so, it says, I was standing in the presence of a pint-sized prophet. The Word of God revealed itself in a few plastic pieces. It can happen anywhere if we're willing to show up and be present to our children and wait for God. And I really think that is true. The other one is also a real short one. It's about Jack. And Jack is he's been through Lego My Bible since the very first night and, is now kind of too old. We're having conversations about Jack. I love you, and maybe you become the assistant, but, these guys are a little bit younger than you. We need to maybe step on. But it says, we never know what will bind us together in this life. There are times and moments of connection that happen each day without us realizing the significance. That is until difficult times come. And one of the children from the church where I serve walked into the hospital one day with what he thought was terrible growing pains. And it turned out that it was a 5-month journey with extremely aggressive rare cancer. On my way to the hospital, I gathered the healing bombs of Pringles and Skittles and a new set of Lego bricks that when they were formed together, it was a prehistoric flying bug. And I thought I brought a ridiculously long prayer shawl that I had knitted more than 6 months before, but I never knew who I was knitting it for until I got that call from Jack's family. I suppose it had always been for him. As I sat by the bedside, it was the language of Legos that created a moment of normalcy. Jack and I were talking about how to put the next piece in the prehistoric bug, but what we were really having was communion. We celebrated a Eucharist of laughter and potato chips that made it clear that God is with us in all times and in all places. And so I believe that, Lego is so commercialized, right? So we've got the movie now and everything, there's like Scooby-Doo Legos. Like when I went to get more minifigures this last time, I ended up not being able to do it because the big box was Simpsons. And I'm like, somehow, I think that might be a far stretch to have Homer